Amid the dazzling glow of cinema, we often see knights swinging their swords with flair, dancing through perfect arcs, and claiming victory with dazzling strikes. Yet the reality on the medieval battlefield was entirely different. It was not a place for performances, rather, weapons were wielded as cold, harsh, and unforgiving tools of survival. And it was there that knights, armored warriors, had to fight with real skill. Half-swording, thrusting into gaps in armor, grappling, hooking, toppling, and using every tiniest advantage to stay alive. On this journey, you will discover not only how knights truly wielded their weapons but also explore grander tales, the rise of Theodora from the depths of Byzantine society, and the legendary confrontation between Saladin and Richard the Lionheart. This is not history told through a romantic lens, but raw, complex, and profoundly human. If you are ready to strip away the illusions that have shaped your imagination, this video will open a wholly different world, one that is more truthful, intense, and captivating than anything cinema has ever portrayed. After stepping through the misty veil of cinematic legends and glimpsing the harsher truths of history, we move deeper into a world few have truly seen. A place where knights are no longer glamorous symbols, but warriors forced to understand every strike, every piece of steel, every breath of their own body to survive. And at this very intersection between illusion and reality, the truth about medieval weapons, a comprehensive debunking unfolds like a door opening into the very essence of warfare in that age. Most of our imagery of medieval weapons comes from film, where the sword is inflated into a symbol of honor, steel glimmers in the sunlight, and every swing seems decisive. Yet, when we look back at historical context and the realities of combat, we find a starkly opposite truth: the sword was not the soul of battle, nor the strongest or most optimal choice. It was the last resort, the weapon drawn when all other options had been destroyed, dropped, or neutralized. Swords existed because they were convenient, not because they were overwhelmingly powerful. The weapons that truly decided the battlefield appear rarely in films, or only as faint props: maces, war hammers, axes, especially the poleaxe. These were the real, armor-breaking machines, tools designed with a single purpose: to counter foes clad in steel. They were not beautiful, symmetrical, or glamorous. But they were effective, and it was this ruthless effectiveness that shaped the medieval world of war. When you look at a poleaxe, you can clearly see the philosophy of the age: every detail exists for a reason. The point for thrusting into armor gaps, the axe blade for chopping and breaking protective metal, the hammer to deliver concussive force that can stun an opponent even without piercing, and the hook to pull down or unseat an enemy from their horse. Not a single centimeter is wasted. Every part serves the ultimate goal, creating a survival advantage amidst chaos. Maces and war hammers are also vivid examples of weaponry as tools. If the armor was too strong, beyond the sword's ability to pierce, a warrior didn't need to break the armor, they only needed to damage the human within. A strong blow from a mace could break bones, injure internal organs, or even bring an enemy down instantly. Steel armor could protect against a sword's edge, but it could not absorb all the force of impact. And it is precisely this mechanism of force, a factor rarely mentioned in films, that determined life or death. In this section, we must also understand something filmmakers often deliberately omit: every type of medieval weapon was created to solve a specific problem on the battlefield. There was no all-powerful weapon. No magic. No battles where knights fought like dancing artists. Instead, there was disciplined calculation: what armor the opponent wore, the terrain, ranged or close combat, infantry or cavalry, and the warrior's primary objective. All these questions led to the choice of the right weapon, much like a skilled craftsman selecting the correct tool for each task. Through this lens, the knight is no longer a romanticized hero or solitary warrior. They are survival experts, fully aware of the physics behind every strike. How to generate maximum force with full body motion, where to strike for optimal damage, how to exploit natural weaknesses in armor, and how to maintain balance in a battlefield filled with mud, corpses, and screams. Cinema constructs a world where the sword is central, but history constructs a reality where knowledge is the ultimate weapon. A warrior is strong not only because of the weapon in their hand, but because they know how to use it in every specific situation. It is this understanding that makes the difference between those who survive and return and those who fall on the battlefield. Another key point emphasized here is the distinction between weapon as symbol and weapon as tool. In the modern imagination, swords are symbols of honor, chivalry, and noble tradition. But for medieval warriors, the sword was only one part of their toolkit, sometimes the least important part. They valued weapons not for beauty, but for function. Weapons were not for display, they were to be used, and sometimes, to kill. Here we encounter an essential truth: war is not a stage, but a place where humans must use everything they have to survive. Understanding weapons means understanding society, strategy, and the psychology of warriors of that era. Every strike, every hook, every shift in grip contains deep logic, a logic never portrayed on screen. Part 1 does more than simply debunk medieval weapons. It opens a new perspective on the medieval world. A world where everything, from a piece of armor, an axe handle, to the tip of a spear, was the result of centuries of optimization. A world where beauty lay not in appearance, but in effectiveness. And a world where knights were no longer mythical figures, but real humans, facing daily life and death choices with skill and limitation. By the end of this section, you will realize one thing: no medieval weapon was ever created to look good on film. They were created to solve problems. And by understanding this logic, you understand an entire era, from battlefield, strategy, to the great stories behind it. And this is only the beginning. Once we understand the nature of weapons, the next step is to explore how knights actually used them. Not with cinematic flourishes, but with rough, intelligent, and terrifyingly effective techniques. This is when the journey moves to Part 2, the art of true combat. Half-swording, thrusting into armor gaps, grappling, where real combat techniques are fully revealed, far beyond anything you've seen on screen. When the truth about medieval weapons has been laid bare, and the illusions of glimmering sword strikes have vanished, a more realistic picture begins to emerge. Warriors of that era did not triumph with a perfect sword, but through a deep understanding of how to wield it in an environment that was perpetually chaotic. And from this foundation, our journey moves into the deeper layers of the art of combat, where technique, force, rhythm, and instinct converge into a form of fighting completely unlike anything depicted in films. This is when the art of true combat, half-swording, thrusting into armor gaps, grappling comes into the light. If Part 1 helped us realize that the world of medieval weapons was built upon the logic of survival, Part 2 shows us how people of that time mastered those tools. And the first thing to clarify: medieval knights did not perform sword dances. They did not spin, flick, or create graceful arcs in the air. On the actual battlefield, every movement had to be economical, precise, and aimed at a single objective: to neutralize the opponent as efficiently as possible. This is why the half-swording technique existed and became a cornerstone of combat for armored knights, a technique almost never depicted in movies. If you imagine a warrior holding a sword in the conventional two-handed grip, half-swording will surprise you: they hold the blade itself. Not because they were reckless, but because it was the only way to transform the sword into a short spear with incredible precision. Sword blades of that era were not razor-sharp along their entire length. The middle sections were thick enough for a warrior to grasp firmly without injury. From this stance, they could maneuver the point like a needle, slipping into the tiniest armor gaps, the only spots where a knight could truly be defeated. This leads us to the second technique, thrusting into armor gaps, a ruthless art, yet a testament to the ingenuity and intelligence of medieval warriors. They did not strike at the shiny breastplate, for a good plate could withstand immense force, rendering swings or thrusts ineffective. Instead, they targeted weaknesses. Underarms, neck, eyes, groin, the back of the knees, or small gaps where armor plates met. These openings existed not only because of the armor's design but also because of the opponent's movements, when arms were raised, when bending, when turning the head. A skilled warrior could read an armored body like an open book. This was not a battle of flashy moves, it was a battle of patience and judgment. A successful thrust did not rely on raw strength, but on perfect timing. That is why the Fekbuch manuscripts, medieval combat manuals, emphasize coordination between mind and body, rather than mere force or technique. Yet this alone does not capture the full reality of knightly combat. Fighting in armor was not just about thrusting and slashing, it was also about grappling. When two armored warriors collided, the distance closed, making swords ineffective. The battlefield became a steel wrestling arena. Throwing, pushing, joint locking, using the sword's hilt as a lever to topple an enemy, using the armor's weight to pin them in mud. A knight who fell amidst this chaos could lose everything, not to a blade, but from being crushed, trampled, or unable to rise in time. This is the difference between romance and reality. In films, knights dodge blows lightly, spinning gracefully among dozens of foes. In real combat, they advance step by step, striving to maintain balance amid mud and corpses. Even the smallest motions, leaning, twisting the wrist, shifting weight, could determine life or death. It is this precision, this optimization in every move, that constitutes the true art of combat. To visualize it, imagine the sound of metal clashing, heavy breathing echoing in a stifling helmet, impacts shaking the body with every blow. In this environment, a successful thrust into an armor gap is not luck. It is the result of years of training, of remaining calm amidst chaos, of knowing every weak point in an opponent's armor as well as one knows one's own body. The Fekbuch manuals, passed down through centuries, do not record artistic sword flourishes. Instead, they teach how to throw an opponent to the ground, how to twist the sword to use the hilt as a striking weapon, how to lock an enemy's arm, how to choke them using their own armor. These techniques are never shown in films. Not because they lack beauty, but because they are too real. Too close to the essence of combat, ruthless, direct, with no room for glamour. When we review the historical records as a whole, it becomes clear, knights were not sword dancers, they were the first hybrid martial artists in European history. They combined weapons, grappling, and targeting weaknesses into a complete system. Their fighting relied not only on strength but on a profound understanding of force, human physiology, and armor construction. Facing a fully armored opponent, brute strength becomes far less relevant. No matter how hard you strike, the armor holds. What you need is technique. And the warrior who understands this most deeply is the one who survives. This is why grappling techniques were almost as important, or sometimes more important, than sword or axe techniques. A skilled knight could topple an opponent with a shift of weight alone, and once the enemy hit the ground, victory was nearly assured. The most fascinating aspect of medieval combat, however, is not merely the techniques, but how warriors understood the rhythm of battle. This is something films rarely depict. They knew when to close in, when to step back, when to switch from sword to dagger, when to abandon a large weapon to leverage their own body weight. All of this unfolded in seconds. It was this adaptability and battlefield reading that transformed them from men in armor into true masters of survival. By the end of this section, you will no longer view medieval combat as a series of beautiful performances. Instead, you will see it as a system of strategy, strength, and resilience, a system forged through centuries of warfare, tempered in blood, and preserved in manuscripts that became the foundation of European martial history. From these subtle and brutal close combat techniques, we move to an even deeper layer of battlefield reality, armor. To understand how a knight fought, we must understand what they wore, what they faced, and how their body functioned under that steel. This is when our journey moves into part 3, Armor and the Brutality of the Medieval Battlefield, where the truths about movement, weight, limitations, and the real horrors of combat will be fully revealed. Having opened the door into the true art of knightly combat, where half-swording, grappling, thrusting into armor gaps, and the cold, survival-driven techniques reveal a reality completely different from romanticized films, we now descend even deeper. To understand why these techniques existed, were honed, and passed down through generations, we must examine what shaped the entire European battlefield of the Middle Ages, armor. And this is where Part 3 begins. A mirror reflecting the brutality, harshness, and raw truth of medieval warfare. Armor was not merely a protective layer, it embodied an entire culture of war forged in steel. When you see a knight clad from head to toe in armor, it is not just a symbol of honor or power, it is proof of supreme adaptation to a world where a single mistake could cost one's life. To truly feel the weight of armor, we must step away from cinematic illusions, where characters fall dramatically from a light push or move as if they were statues of living metal. On the real battlefield, plate armor was nearly a technological marvel of the medieval era. It was not designed to stop every blow, but to make death more difficult for the enemy. Curved steel plates, reinforced ridges, and segmented structures were all developed from thousands of bloody encounters. Archers striking from afar, cavalry colliding like twin storms of steel, and infantry clashing at such close range that breath mingled. In reality, a knight in armor could run, twist, leap, mount a horse, and even wrestle on the ground. They were not immobilized like statues. On the contrary, the armor was optimized for efficient movement. Steel hinges, leather padding, and finely tuned straps all work together to allow a soldier to fight for hours while maintaining maximum mobility. Yet, when it comes to brutality, we must look closer at situations that films often avoid. A strike from a war hammer to a helmet may not pierce steel, but it could shatter a jaw, stun severely, or disorient an opponent for several seconds, and in the chaos of spears and screams, those seconds were enough to decide life or death. A thrust that doesn't penetrate armor but slips into the underarm, wrist, or thigh, impervious weak points, could end the fight instantly. This is why the techniques we explored earlier, like half-swording and grappling, exist, not because knights were weak, but because their opponent's armor was strong enough to force them to find another way. It must be understood that armor does not protect against fatigue. Imagine standing amidst hundreds of people, the clang of metal all around, the ground shaking under hooves, sweat stinging your eyes, hot breath behind a steel mask. Armor weighing 20 to 30 kilograms is manageable for a trained person, but heat and mental strain are the silent killers. The medieval battlefield was not just a place of cutting and thrusting, it was a battlefield of willpower, where endurance, alertness, and spirit determined who would survive the day. What makes armor extraordinary is its dual nature, it saves lives, yet can become a deadly burden. When a knight falls into mud, armor can absorb water, becoming heavier, making it impossible to rise. When pinned under the body and armor of another, escape is nearly impossible. These moments, though rare, reveal the fragility of humans beneath the seemingly invincible steel. Yet it is this very truth that makes armor the emblem of the medieval battlefield, unglamorous, harsh, practical, and life-sustaining. It conveys the message of the age: to survive, one must adapt. To endure, one must be stronger than fear, heavier than the steel encasing oneself. The evolution of armor also reflects the relentless progression of warfare. When English longbows shook Europe, armor had to improve. With the advent of firearms, armor adapted again, before gradually retreating from the battlefield as weapon technology outpaced the capabilities of hand-forged steel. Each layer of armor is a historical note, a blueprint of a society revolving around protection and destruction. And here, the brutality of the battlefield is most evident. The arms race between armor and weaponry was a spiral of life and death. Each time armor became stronger, more brutal weapons emerged. Each time weapons sharpened, defensive techniques became more sophisticated. Steel against steel, will against will. No moment was completely safe. Viewed through the lens of truth, rather than the polished light of cinema, the medieval battlefield appears entirely different. A chaotic stage where people fought not to become heroes, but to return home. Armor was a silent yet ruthless companion. It protected, yet demanded. It helped one survive, but could drag one down if mistakes were made. And it is this truth, raw and unembellished, that makes armor the immortal symbol of the era. Not for its beauty, but because it tells the story of a world where survival was the supreme law. To continue, we will move beyond the steel layer and explore another facet of the medieval battlefield: tactics, formations, terrain, and the psychology of combat. But before we do, hold the image of a knight standing in a storm of metal, sweat mixing with dust, eyes fixed on the enemy, because armor is not just protection, it is the soul of an age. As we close the chapter on armor and the harsh reality of the medieval battlefield, where steel was not just material but destiny, the thin line between life and death, another question naturally arises: if armor was so strong, if a soldier's body was encased in near-perfect protection, why did knights still carry so many weapons, seemingly redundant? This very question opens Part 4, where we delve into the logic of survival that defined an entire era. In films, a knight is often shown wielding only a sword, sometimes a massive greatsword, and charging into battle as if it were the only weapon needed. But in historical reality, a knight entering combat was more like a craftsman entering his workshop, carrying tools to address every specific situation. Each sword, spear, war hammer, dagger, existed for a reason. Each weapon was not merely a choice, but an answer to a matter of life or death. To understand this, one must first remember that as armor became more sophisticated, the battlefield had to change. A beautiful lawn. Sword could inflict deep cuts on unarmored foes, but when facing an opponent clad in layers of steel, that blade was nearly useless in direct strikes. Weapons once considered crude, war hammers, spiked maces, axes, crafted to crush, deform, and damage from within, became primary tools of the fight. Thus, a knight carried multiple weapons not to show off, but because each one represented a strategy. The sword to strike unarmored or weak enemies. Hammers and maces to attack plate armor. Rondel daggers to thrust into armor gaps at extreme close range during ground grapples. Long spears to charge while mounted. Every engagement was a constantly changing problem, and the knight needed the right tool to survive each moment. Imagine a knight stepping onto the battlefield, the neighing of horses, clouds of dust rising, hundreds of warriors colliding like two moving walls. He might start with a lance, aiming for the strongest impact. But when the lance breaks, which it often did after one or two strikes, he must immediately switch to his sword. If the opponent wears thick armor, the sword gives way to a war hammer or mace. And when everything descends into chaos, when the battlefield turns into a wrestling match in mud and blood, the last usable weapon is the dagger, the ultimate tool to finish off a fallen foe. The medieval battlefield was not a place where one weapon could suffice. Each weapon reflected a depth of strategy, a preparedness for the worst-case scenario. If the sword symbolized honor, the war hammer symbolized cold practicality. If the lance proclaimed cavalry power, the dagger acknowledged a harsh truth: a fight could end in mud, near the ground, close enough to hear the enemy's last breath. It must also be understood that every weapon had its limitations. The long spear was strong but slow, effective but fragile. The sword was versatile but lacked piercing power. The war hammer was powerful but heavy and hard to control. No weapon was perfect, just as no armor was fully impenetrable. A knight's entire strategy was built on this principle: use the right tool, at the right moment, against the right opponent. Moreover, the battlefield did not always follow a plan. A horse could be injured in the chaos, an ally could fall before your eyes. Terrain could shift within minutes as mud softened or formations collapsed. All of this made having multiple weapons a form of insurance. The more options, the higher the chance of survival. A knight knew that survival relied not only on strength, but on preparation. But the deeper reason was that weapons were not only for countering the enemy, they were a way for knights to adapt to their duties. A knight did not just fight. He protected, attacked, pursued, held positions, supported comrades, and sometimes had to operate in the most absurdly dangerous situations. A multitasking soldier required a multi-tool arsenal. That flexibility was the source of their true power. Consider the combined tactics of weapons. A knight might use a shield to create space, a sword to push the enemy back, and immediately switch to a war hammer to deliver a knockout blow. This was a blend of art and survival, intuition and experience. No single weapon could fulfill all these requirements. Finally, carrying multiple weapons was a reminder of the nature of the battlefield. Nothing was certain. A soldier entered combat not with absolute confidence, but with the most thorough preparation possible. Weapons were not fashion statements or symbols of power, they were hope. A backup sword could save a life. A dagger might be the only functional weapon when all else was lost. A mace could become the final choice against an armored foe. Looking at a knight laden with diverse weapons is not ostentation, it is proof of battlefield intelligence. It is a person who understands that war is not for simplicity. Each tool is part of an overall strategy, a piece of the survival puzzle in a world where no one can afford mistakes. As we conclude this section, let us hold on to a medieval truth: no weapon was redundant, only preparation could ever be insufficient. It was this mindset that made knights true survival machines on the battlefield. From here, we prepare to move to another aspect, not only weapons and armor, but tactics, formations, and collective spirit, the factors that determine the outcome of every battle. As we conclude our exploration of the knight's tactical mindset and the reason they always carried a diverse arsenal, it becomes clear that the medieval battlefield was not a stage for displaying flashy swordplay, but a place where survival and adaptability determined everything. From swings and strikes to grappling techniques within steel armor, each weapon choice was carefully considered, like a craftsman controlling every tool to solve life-or-death problems on the field. But if the knight symbolizes strength and skill in combat, the story of Theodora, from the depths of Byzantine society, reveals a different facet, where power did not come from sword or shield, but from intellect, cunning, and the ability to survive in a world full of pressure and injustice. Theodora, born into a poor family as the daughter of a bear trainer, faced harsh survival challenges from early childhood. When her father passed away, her family fell to the brink of destitution, forcing Theodora to learn how to stand on her own in an unforgiving society. Her first lesson in power came before the hippodrome crowds, where cheering or jeering throngs taught her that capturing attention is the first step in influencing and shaping the world around her. From these experiences, Theodora developed a sharp sense of power and influence, a weapon of the mind that no sword could ever rival. To truly understand Theodora, we must consider the Byzantine society in which she grew up. Byzantium was highly stratified, where power was not only held by the royal family and nobility, but also by factions like the Greens and Blues, whose loyalty, strategy, and ability to sway crowds could determine individual and citywide destinies. From a young age, Theodora observed and learned how these factions operated, how they stirred emotions, and guided the will of thousands. These seemingly simple lessons became the foundation of her skills in manipulation, negotiation, and, ultimately, survival in circumstances where others would easily falter. These harsh experiences sharpened both her intellect and her resilience. As a young woman, Theodora entered the world of performance, where intelligence and sharpness determined survival. Byzantium's stage was no playground. It was a place filled with prejudice, where performers were undervalued, yet it was also a space where they could profoundly influence crowds. With her ability to communicate, evoke emotion, and captivate audiences, Theodora transformed the stage into her first school of leadership and persuasion. Every appearance, every gesture, every word was practical training in power, a survival skill she carried throughout her life. Yet Theodora's life was not confined to the spotlight. She endured hardship, exploitation, and abandonment in North Africa, where every skill and ounce of intellect was pushed to its limits. Rather than succumb, she learned self-reliance, forging an unbreakable will. Her journey back to Constantinople was not only physical but spiritual, where every step and decision strengthened her courage and resilience. From these seemingly hopeless trials, Theodora learned to confront adversity, turn difficulty into opportunity, and harness her inner strength to achieve seemingly impossible goals. Astonishingly, these survival experiences transformed Theodora from a poor girl into an icon of power and influence. She learned not only to endure but to shape and alter society. The way she observed, analyzed, and navigated relationships was like a warrior on a battlefield, but instead of weapons, she wielded intellect, acuity, and psychological influence. Every decision, from building alliances to understanding the crowd's needs and mindset, was like a knight selecting the right weapon for each situation, precise, effective, and decisive. We cannot overlook Theodora's skill in learning and adapting. She observed every detail of the world around her. From power structures to human behavior, from factional dynamics to citizens' reactions under pressure. Her ability to synthesize information, analyze situations, and make strategic decisions was rare, and it enabled her to overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges. These insights not only ensured her survival but also paved the way for her profound influence in Byzantine history. Ultimately, reflecting on Theodora's origins, we see an important truth. Power and influence do not stem solely from birth or title, but from survival skills, intellect, and the ability to seize opportunities. Like a knight choosing the right weapon to win a battlefield encounter, Theodora selected mental skills, observational acumen, and social intelligence to transform adversity into strength. Rising from the bottom of society, facing harsh trials, and learning to navigate power, she demonstrated that true strength lies not in weapons or status, but in courage, intellect, and human resilience. Her story is not merely historical, it is a survival lesson, showing how one can rise above circumstances, turn hardship into opportunity, and use inner strength to make a profound impact on the world. As we trace Theodora's origins from the depths of Byzantine society, where she learned her first lessons in power, influence, and survival, the next phase of her extraordinary journey unfolds, a period marked by drama, challenge, and the harsh realities of life, her youth spent on the stage, in performance, and navigating the darker corners of society. In this phase, Theodora transformed from a poor girl into a known performer, a clever courtesan, and above all, a master of survival in a world full of traps. Every step, every decision during this time was like a strike on a battlefield, skillful, precise, and life-determining. The Byzantine stage, with its flickering lights and expectant audiences, was no place for the weak. Performances demanded not only talent but also the ability to improvise, understand the audience's psyche, and leave a lasting impression. Theodora, with her sharp intellect and keen survival instincts, seized every opportunity to assert herself. She learned to control her gaze, gestures, and words to capture attention, turning the respect or admiration of the crowd into her own resource. This skill, the ability to transform the stage and the eyes of others into tools for survival, to turn prejudice into opportunity, was rare and invaluable. Every performance was an intellectual battle, where she had to persuade, protect herself, and navigate the schemes and dangers surrounding her. Yet the stage was only part of the story. Theodora also confronted the darker aspects of society, where survival was never guaranteed, and exploitation and abandonment lurked constantly. She experienced life as a courtesan, learning how to negotiate advantages, shape relationships, and balance allure with personal authority. In this world, beauty was a weapon, but intellect and the ability to read people were decisive. One wrong move, one lapse of vigilance could be catastrophic. With her sharp mind and survival instincts, Theodora learned to shine while protecting herself and maintaining her position in a high-pressure environment. This phase of her life also illustrates an essential principle: true power does not solely derive from official authority or fame, but from understanding and controlling one's environment. She constantly observed, analyzed, and adjusted her strategy, much like a warrior on the battlefield, yet her battlefield was society, and her weapons were intellect, dexterity, and the ability to seize every opportunity. Every situation, from interacting with influential figures to safeguarding herself against potential threats, was navigated with calm strategy, turning challenges into stepping stones for advancement. These experiences honed Theodora's extraordinary adaptability and resilience. Faced with harsh trials, she learned not only to survive but to manage circumstances, converting pressure into opportunity for growth. She understood that survival and success in a society rife with injustice and traps demanded a delicate blend of intelligence, skill, and foresight. This period forged a strong, sharp, and capable version of Theodora, prepared for the greater steps in her life. Notably, Theodora did not merely survive, she wielded profound influence in her environment. Every action, every decision, was carefully measured to maximize benefit and minimize risk. She learned to leverage relationships, understand those around her, and convert personal power into tangible influence. Like a knight selecting the right weapon for a battlefield victory, Theodora chose mental skills and strategic approaches to overcome adversity, turning a treacherous environment into a springboard for success. Moreover, her experiences as a performer and courtesan cultivated confidence and strategic vision for the next stages of her life. Persuasion, emotional management, and the ability to influence others became not just survival tools but the foundation of the political power she would later achieve. Step by step, experience by experience, Theodora trained herself to stand firm amidst peril, to turn weaknesses into strengths, and to build exceptional intellect and resolve. Ultimately, reflecting on this phase of Theodora's life, we glean a vital lesson. True strength does not lie in birth or status, but in survival skills, intellect, and the ability to seize opportunities. She proved that a person can rise above adversity, turn challenges into opportunities, and use intelligence, dexterity, and courage to exert profound influence on society. The phase of performer, courtesan, survivor was not merely a stepping stone to power. It was living proof of humanity's extraordinary capacity for adaptation, self-reliance, and strategic thinking in the face of severe hardship. Her story reminds us that to survive and succeed in a challenging world, intellect, courage, and keen observation can be as critical as any weapon on the battlefield, and often, more decisive than even the sharpest sword. As we leave behind Theodora's challenging youth, where she honed her skills of survival, dexterity, and the art of wielding influence through intelligence and adaptability, the next chapter opens, marked by both turbulence and power, her meeting and marriage to Emperor Justinian. This is not merely a love story, but a vivid testament to how a capable and determined individual can alter the course of history. From her careful navigation of the stage and life as a courtesan, Theodora now faced her greatest challenge. Becoming the political partner of an emperor, the ultimate authority of the Byzantine Empire. Justinian, with his ambition to unify the empire and implement grand reforms, recognized in Theodora not just beauty, but intellect and resolve. Unlike many royal marriages driven solely by politics, Justinian was drawn to her sharp mind, resilience, and ability to see through people. This was a turning point. Theodora did not become a decorative empress. She became a strategic partner, a companion in critical decisions, and at times, the driving force shaping policy. Their relationship demonstrates that true power does not arise solely from the throne, but from the combination of intelligence, courage, and subtle influence wielded by those beside the ruler. Their marriage, amid challenges and resistance from the aristocracy, became a symbol of collective strength between two extraordinary individuals. Theodora not only fought for her position within the palace but actively participated in political decisions, from legitimizing the marriage itself to defending the rights of women and the poor. She understood that survival and influence in a court full of power plays and intrigue required a careful balance of personal strength and strategic negotiation. Every move, every decision by Theodora during this time resembled a tactical strike on a battlefield. Precise, decisive, and capable of shifting the balance of power. The marriage also highlights Theodora's diplomatic and strategic acumen. When facing pressure from nobles or powerful factions within the empire, she did not act impulsively but relied on a deep understanding of human psychology, society, and power dynamics. Her sharpness allowed her to maintain her position while turning challenges into opportunities to consolidate influence and implement crucial social reforms. Like a knight selecting the right weapon for each battle, Theodora chose her words, demeanor, and strategic actions to prevail in a palace rife with pitfalls. Remarkably, through her relationship with Justinian, Theodora demonstrated that strength comes not only from formal authority but from the ability to shape thought, influence, and leadership from beside the throne. She became an icon of soft power, the capacity to persuade, direct, and influence others without force. This teaches an essential lesson: in any system of power, the combination of intellect, courage, and situational mastery often determines outcomes more than formal authority alone. Furthermore, their marriage illustrates Theodora's strategic role in shaping imperial law and policy. Through her influence and skill, Justinian enacted significant reforms, protecting the rights of women, the poor, and vulnerable populations. Theodora was not merely an empress. She was a catalyst and executor of meaningful change, leaving a lasting impact on Byzantine society. Each political decision she made was carefully calculated, much like a tactical strike on the battlefield, precise, effective, and transformative. Another vital aspect is the mutual support between Justinian and Theodora. Their relationship was not a one-sided domination but a strategic partnership. Justinian provided official power, while Theodora provided strategy, intelligence, and social navigation. This combination enabled them to overcome immense challenges, from aristocratic opposition to revolts across the empire. Together, they safeguarded the throne and implemented reforms with far-reaching consequences, demonstrating that true power lies in the synergy of formal authority and subtle, internal influence. Ultimately, looking back at the marriage of Theodora and Justinian, we see an important lesson: real power does not come solely from the throne or status, but from intelligence, acuity, and strategic influence. From a poor stage girl, Theodora transformed her survival skills and intellect into soft power, helping to shape the course of an empire. Their marriage was not merely a love story. It was proof of the potency of intelligence, strategy, and the ability to shape history from behind the throne. Their story reminds us that those who change history are often not the ones holding power directly, but those who know how to wield intelligence, courage, and subtle influence to shape the world around them, just as Theodora did at every step of her extraordinary life. As we witness the powerful marriage between Theodora and Justinian, where she was not merely an empress but a strategic partner to the emperor, the next chapter in her extraordinary journey unfolds, marked by drama, challenge, and the ultimate test of intellect, courage, and leadership: her reign and the Nika revolt. This was a period where her soft power, leadership, and strategic vision shone most brightly, proving that true power does not reside solely in the throne or sword, but in courage, intelligence, and the ability to manipulate circumstances with precision. The Nika revolt, one of the largest uprisings in Byzantine history, began as a conflict between the chariot racing factions, the Greens and the Blues, but quickly escalated into a political crisis threatening Emperor Justinian's life and the very survival of the empire. In the midst of chaos, many suggested that the emperor should flee, relinquishing power to preserve his life. Yet Theodora stood as a symbol of unwavering resolve. Her famous declaration, "It is better to die in purple than to live in exile," was not merely a personal statement but a bold defiance of fate, demonstrating the unbreakable spirit and steadfast resolve of a true leader. Theodora's courage during the Nika revolt was not only personal bravery but a sophisticated strategic decision. She recognized that fleeing would mean the collapse of the empire's authority and the undoing of the social reforms she and Justinian had painstakingly established. Conversely, standing firm would protect the throne, affirm their power, and assert control over the situation. Theodora transformed her personal resolve into strategic strength, directly influencing the emperor's decisions and the fate of the empire, proving that sometimes, a single bold choice can alter the course of history. But the Nika revolt is not merely a story of individual valor, it is a testament to Theodora's comprehensive leadership and strategic acumen. As the mob surged through the streets, threatening the emperor's life, she relied not on formal power or the palace guard alone. She applied intelligence, acute observation, and a deep understanding of crowd psychology to determine the most effective course of action. In chaotic moments, soft power and strategic foresight were as crucial as military force. The right words, demeanor, and timely decisions could determine the fate of an entire city. Once order was restored, Theodora leveraged her influence to enact groundbreaking social reforms. She promoted policies protecting women, the poor, and sexual slaves, established safe houses, and punished sexual exploitation. She expanded property rights for women, achieving social advances unprecedented in Byzantine history. Every reform was rooted in real-life experience, an ability to perceive injustices, and a desire to use power as a tool for societal change rather than mere self-preservation. Theodora was not only a survivor and leader in moments of danger but also an architect of lasting societal transformation. Remarkably, Theodora combined personal power with political influence to implement sustainable reforms. She understood that true power lies not merely in military might or the throne but in the capacity to influence the thoughts, behaviors, and decisions of others. Every action, from advising the emperor to managing factions and navigating the populace, was executed with subtlety, wisdom, and strategy. Her skill ensured not only survival during the Nika revolt but also the opportunity to consolidate authority, protect reforms, and expand her influence. Another crucial factor was the synergy between Theodora and Justinian during this period. Their partnership, a ruler with formal authority and a visionary with strategic influence, produced a power greater than any opposing force. They were not merely emperor and empress but a highly coordinated strategic team, using authority, intellect, and strategy to navigate crises, protect the empire, and implement essential reforms. This demonstrates that power is not always about imposition. It can arise from coordination, strategy, and exceptional intelligence. Finally, reflecting on her reign and the Nika revolt, an essential lesson emerges: strength and power are measured not only by the throne or armies but by leadership, strategic intelligence, and courage in decisive moments. Theodora, from a poor stage girl, transformed her resolve, intellect, and survival skills into political power, reshaping the course of an empire and instituting social reforms with lasting impact. Her story reminds us that those who truly change the world are often not the ones holding formal authority, but those who know how to leverage intellect, courage, and influence to shape the destiny of society, just as Theodora did in every step of her extraordinary life. Having witnessed Theodora's exceptional power and intellect during her reign and the Nika revolt, where she not only saved the throne but also implemented profound social reforms. The historical stage now shifts to another dramatic chapter, the confrontation between Saladin and Richard the Lionheart. This was not merely a battle between two legendary commanders but a meeting and clash of civilizations, where differing values, philosophies, and combat skills created a historical narrative both dramatic and deeply instructive. Saladin, the calm and just leader of the Islamic world, was not only a warrior but also a statesman and a master strategist. His philosophy emphasized discipline, unity, and long-term planning, not only to win battles but to consolidate and protect his realm. In contrast, Richard the Lionheart, the perfect knight of the West, stood out for his fiery courage, boldness, and willingness to engage directly, using personal strength and speed to lead his army. This contrast reflected not just their personalities but the core values of their respective civilizations, one of discipline, strategy, and politics. The other of knighthood, honor, speed, and individual valor. Their confrontation unfolded during the Crusades, with Jerusalem and surrounding lands as the strategic prize. Saladin unified the Islamic world and recaptured Jerusalem, fighting not merely for honor or personal ambition, but to establish a stable political and military system that combined strength with justice. Richard, meanwhile, pursued the Crusades to restore Western glory, defend faith, and uphold personal honor. Each move on the battlefield reflected the underlying philosophy and foundational values of each civilization. A remarkable feature of this confrontation was the mutual respect between the two leaders. At the Battle of Jaffa, when Richard's horse was struck down, Saladin sent him a replacement, a small gesture that conveyed profound messages of honor, chivalry, and respect for an opponent. This act highlighted their character and demonstrated that war could be more than destruction. It was also a refined game of strategy, ethics, and human values. Even amidst chaos, moments like these revealed the enduring human principles admired across civilizations. Examining their tactics and combat techniques reveals further contrasts. Saladin relied on long-term strategies, flexible troop coordination, exploiting enemy weaknesses, and creating strategic advantages before direct engagement. Richard, on the other hand, emphasized the personal valor of his knights, exploiting speed, strength, and direct assault coordination to overwhelm opponents. This opposition produced battles both dramatic and complex, where victory depended not only on physical power but also on strategy, intelligence, and rapid situational assessment. Another compelling aspect was how each commander influenced his troops and the populace. Saladin's political vision and ethical leadership maintained loyalty, discipline, and morale among his forces. Richard inspired through courage, honor, and direct battlefield leadership. Both used psychological influence and strategic command to maintain morale and effectiveness, showing that true power in war comes as much from leadership and influence as from weapons. The confrontation also highlighted profound cultural differences between East and West in the medieval period. Saladin embodied harmony between strategy and ethics, with long-term goals and sustainability, while Richard personified the chivalric spirit, prioritizing personal honor and rapid battlefield response. These differences not only created dramatic conflicts but offered insights into how civilizations shape strategy, values, and martial spirit. Through this lens, war becomes not merely a territorial struggle but a reflection of culture, philosophy, and human character. By the end of the campaigns, despite various victories and setbacks, both leaders left a lasting legacy. The final treaty preserved Jerusalem under Islamic control while allowing Christian access, reflecting compromise, mutual respect, and political acumen. This outcome demonstrated that power and success derive not only from military strength but also from strategy, respect, and leadership, timeless lessons in warfare and governance. Ultimately, looking back at the clash between Saladin and Richard the Lionheart, we see a story not just of victory or defeat but of two civilizations, their intellect, ethics, strategy, and the people behind the swords. The contrast between Saladin and Richard deepens our understanding of military technique and strategy while offering profound insight into the philosophies, values, and spirit of their respective worlds. This story reminds us that in history, triumphs arise not only from physical might but also from intelligence, courage, and nuanced leadership, and that the greatest confrontations often occur when two individuals with differing philosophies and values meet, leaving enduring lessons for future generations. Having journeyed through the fiery battles and strategic confrontations between Saladin and Richard the Lionheart, where two commanders representing opposing civilizations displayed military might, intellect, and ethics on the battlefield, the historical stage now unfolds into a chapter of profound significance, treaties, legacy, and timeless lessons. This is the moment where individual stories, strategies, and exercises of power converge, revealing how the decisions, actions, and philosophies of historical figures not only shaped their present but left enduring marks for future generations. Here, viewers witness how human strength, intellect, and courage transcend war, hostility, and adversity, becoming values that endure through time. The treaty between Richard and Saladin, concluding the Third Crusade, was more than a political agreement, it was a testament to negotiation, respect, and strategic intelligence. Jerusalem remained under Islamic control but was open to Christian pilgrims, a decision that safeguarded Saladin's interests while honoring Richard's objectives. This accord demonstrates that victory is measured not merely by force or counterattack, but by the capacity to assess the broader situation, weigh long-term benefits, and craft solutions that endure. It vividly illustrates that history is written not only with swords or brutal battles but with intellect, adaptability, and the ability to reconcile competing interests. Theodora's legacy is another striking example of timeless power. Through her social and political reforms, protecting women, the poor, and enslaved individuals, establishing safe houses, and expanding property rights for women, she transformed her authority into a force for real societal change. These reforms not only helped those facing injustice in her time but laid the foundations for legal and social structures that would resonate for centuries. Theodora's decisiveness and courage demonstrate that one individual can leave a lasting legacy by combining power, intellect, and the ambition to improve society. Simultaneously, the relationship between Saladin and Richard leaves enduring lessons, showing that respect for opponents and ethical conduct can coexist with strategy and power. Acts of mutual respect, such as gifting a horse to an adversary or treating enemies honorably, established a standard of honor, character, and chivalric spirit that transcends short-term conflicts. These historical anecdotes are more than curiosities. They teach how to maintain dignity, wisdom, and strategy in any circumstance, whether in war or politics. What is remarkable about this convergence is how all these historical figures, knights, Theodora, Justinian, Saladin, and Richard, demonstrate the power of integrating intellect, strategy, and character. They show that true victory and influence come not from brute strength or formal position, but from the ability to manage situations, understand human psychology, and make precise decisions at critical moments. From a knight mastering battlefield tactics to Theodora navigating the Byzantine court and implementing social reforms, to Saladin and Richard forging a lasting treaty, a consistent principle emerges. Genuine power is inseparable from intelligence, courage, and long-term vision. The treaties and legacies also underscore another point: history is never simple or romanticized. Strategic decisions, political maneuvers, and wartime actions are complex, sometimes ruthless, yet imbued with profound humanity. In every act, from Theodora defending women's rights to Saladin negotiating with Richard, we see the delicate balance between personal interest, social responsibility, and long-term strategy. History teaches us that glory does not come from legend or superficial grandeur, but from the combination of intellect, courage, and the ability to wield influence meaningfully. Furthermore, these historical narratives reveal the relationship between the individual and society, between power and responsibility. Figures like Theodora or Saladin influenced the world not only through authority or martial skill, but by shaping and improving the society around them. Every decision carried consequences, and these consequences became enduring legacies. Treaties, social reforms, and strategic actions illustrate that power entails responsibility, and how it is exercised determines the value a leader leaves for future generations. Finally, this concluding chapter highlights the synthesis of lessons from all prior stories, from the combat tactics of knights, to Theodora's soft power and political acumen, to the strategy and honor of Saladin and Richard. Together, they form a panoramic view of history, a world not glamorous but rich in complexity and human value. These timeless narratives remind us that, whether in war, politics, or social life, intellect, courage, strategic foresight, and the ability to influence others are decisive factors in lasting success and legacy. History, then, is not merely battles or fame, but a living testament to human strength, wisdom, and fortitude, qualities that transcend time and continue to resonate today. And now, having explored the full truth about medieval knights' weapons and tactics, from the flashy swords of Hollywood imagination to maces, war hammers, axes, and poleaxes, you can see one undeniable truth: medieval combat was not a glamorous performance, but a brutal art of survival, where every strike was calculated, and every weapon was a problem-solving tool. We've witnessed knights not dancing with swords like in the movies, but grappling, piercing through gaps in armor, struggling in heavy plate. We've seen battlefields filled with mud, smoke, screams, and exhaustion, where life and death hung by a single precise blow. If you ever thought history was just romantic tales of knights, now you understand that behind the legends lies real tactical intelligence, skill, and the raw courage of survival. And the fascinating part is that the lessons from the past don't stop at warfare. They teach us how to think, prepare, and respond in any battle life throws our way. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to continue exploring more historical truths with me. stories where every tale holds timeless lessons, leaving you amazed, captivated, and unable to look away.